You know, you hear a name like Olympus, and you think cameras, you think medical equipment, a totally respected global company, right? Well, what if I told you that company was hiding a secret so massive it could tear the whole thing down from the inside? Today, we are diving deep into the Olympus scandal. It's an incredible story about a billion-dollar lie, a wild clash of cultures, and ultimately, the massive cost of silence.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth does a company of this size just make over $1 billion in losses disappear? And not for a year, but for more than a decade. That is the mystery we're going to crack open today. So let's get right into it.
Before we get into the how, I just want us to sit with this number for a second. $1.7 billion. I mean, this wasn't just a bad quarter or a rounding error. This was a financial black hole that was meticulously and deliberately hidden from everyone.
Okay, so every story like this has a beginning. To really understand the explosion, we've got to go back in time, back to where it all started in the late 1990s, when this massive secret was first buried. You know, what's so fascinating is this whole thing didn't start out as some grand scheme to steal money. Nope, it started with bad investments. See, back then, Olympus, like a lot of Japanese companies, got into financial speculation. And when the market went south, they got burned badly. They were left with this colossal hole in their books, and instead of owning up to it, they chose a very different path.
And this is where a really crucial cultural idea comes into play: saving face. You see, in Japanese corporate culture, admitting a failure of this size isn't just a balance sheet problem. It is a deep, profound humiliation. The pressure to keep up appearances, to maintain that image of success, it was just so immense that it drove executives to make a pretty fateful decision: hide the problem, no matter what it takes.
All right, so the big question, how did they actually do it? This wasn't some simple trick in a spreadsheet. Oh no. This was a complex, sophisticated, and frankly, kind of brilliant machine of deception that was built over many, many years.
Okay, so here's the scheme in a nutshell. First, they took all those bad investments and just moved them off the main books, basically hiding them in the shadows. Then, they started buying up these random, unrelated companies and deliberately overpaid for them. But here's the key. They paid these massive, absurd advisory fees to shell companies. And that fee money, that was the magic. It was secretly funneled right back to pay off those original hidden losses. It was like a giant, global-scale magic trick with billions of dollars.
And the crazy part? It actually worked. For more than a decade, this cover-up machine just hummed along in the background. Auditors either missed it or were in on it, and the company's really tight-knit culture basically protected the secret. To the outside world, Olympus looked as healthy and successful as ever.
But then, something happened that nobody saw coming. The company decided to appoint a new CEO, and he wasn't one of them. He was an outsider, and this, right here, is where the whole story completely flips on its head. Let's meet our guy, Michael Woodford. He'd been with the company for a while, but he was still an outsider, a British executive who became the very first non-Japanese CEO in the company's history. It was supposed to signal this new global era for Olympus. He just had no idea what he was really walking into. I mean, can you imagine? He thought he was taking the top job at this respected powerhouse company, but in reality, he was being handed the keys to a ticking time bomb.
So Woodford gets the job, and he does what any new boss would do. He starts digging into the numbers, and almost immediately he starts asking questions. The kind of questions that, it turns out, were very, very dangerous to ask.
And the speed at which everything unraveled is just breathtaking. We're talking weeks. Woodford gets appointed, he spots these insane advisory fees, and starts demanding answers from the board. What was their response? On October 14th, just 2 weeks after he became CEO, they fired him. A unanimous vote. The message couldn't have been clearer. Stop digging. And this is really the heart of the conflict. For Woodford, it was simple: transparency, accountability, a duty to the shareholders. But for the insiders, it was all about loyalty, harmony, protecting the group, and saving face, even if that meant living a lie. You had these two completely incompatible worldviews just smashing into each other.
But here's the thing about Michael Woodford. Getting fired didn't shut him up. Not at all. In fact, it did the complete opposite. What he did next was going to blow this whole thing wide open for the entire world to see.
He realized just how deep this went, and, genuinely fearing for his own safety, he got out of Japan. Immediately. And he didn't just walk away. He took all the evidence he had and went straight to the international media.
The story just exploded, and after more than a decade in the dark, the secret was finally out. The fallout was just massive and immediate. Top execs were arrested, the company got buried under enormous fines and lawsuits. I mean, former bosses were ordered to pay back over $500 million. But the damage went even wider. It put the entire corporate culture of Japan Inc. under this intense global microscope.
But out of all that chaos, something important happened. The Olympus scandal basically forced a national conversation, a really painful one, but a necessary one, about corporate governance and transparency in Japan, leading to some major, much-needed reforms.
So what's the big takeaway here? Well, we saw a massive, decade-long fraud that was fueled by this intense cultural pressure to avoid shame. We saw how just one person, an outsider who had the courage to ask the obvious questions, brought the whole thing crashing down. And in the end, we saw how this incredibly painful episode actually became the catalyst for some really important change.
And it kind of leaves us with this one last question to think about. We're all taught that loyalty is a good thing, right? But the Olympus story is this powerful, stark reminder to ask ourselves, when does that loyalty stop being a strength and actually become a liability? When does protecting the team come at the cost of telling the truth?